Today I'm working on a 2004 Ford Expedition, Eddie Bauer, um, and I'm replacing the shocks. And I'm not buying the package that includes the spring, so I'm going to show you how to take the shock out of the spring cage on. They're basically what we used to call McPherson struts, and you can save yourself a lot of money. You can get some better shocks if you do it this way. Most of the shocks that you can buy that have the spring already attached are dual tube shocks. They're not nearly as good, both in longevity and efficiency, as monotube shocks. But typically you can't buy monotube shocks in the package with the spring on. So that's why I chose to buy monotube shocks and just go ahead and simply replace the spring, the shock. There's nothing wrong with the spring, right? It takes a little extra work, but I'm going to show you how to do it, and it's really not that much extra work. So we're going to start by taking this wheel off. So let's get started. So let's start with the tools you're going to need. You're going to need a jack, obviously, to get the thing up off the ground, and also some jack stands, 2 jack stands, because you need to have both sides off the ground at the same time. In this case, I actually have it on a hoist to get the car off the ground, but I am going to need this jack once I get the wheel off to compress the spring, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. You're also going to need a 30 millimeter socket. That's for the big bolt that goes through the bottom of the shock. Impact gun really is pretty handy. You're going to need a big crescent wrench, screwdriver to pop the hubcap off, a 15 mil ratcheting wrench is really handy to get the top studs off. You're going to need a spring compressor, and people are afraid of these things. They say they're a pain in the neck to use, but I'm going to show you why. In this case, it's going to be really easy to use these things. Then you're going to need this is a 19 or 21, yeah, it's 21, to take the lug nuts off. And then for the top stud on the shock that holds it into the tower, I think these are a 15. They could be an 18 or 14 depending on what shocks that you have. So really not a whole lot of tools. So let's go ahead and get started. Pop off that hubcap. So on the Eddie Bauer, the hubcap has, I think it's the same on most, just has a little slot here. Screwdriver goes in. You can twist that to get it started. It's a little harder to do it with one hand. Get that started and then just work your way around the hubcap and pop it off. These lug nuts are 21s, so yeah, an impact wrench is really handy on these, obviously. And I just set them inside the hubcap. That way they don't get lost. Now here's the actual trick to using these spring compressors for this particular job. There's no weight on the suspension at this point, so this shock is fully extended. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put these spring compressors up in here, put it on one side, and then kind of slide it around to the other side so that I can get pressure on the spring on both sides. And obviously it's just a little harder to do with one hand than it might be with two, but so yeah, so I've got one in position on that side, and I can just tighten it by hand. You can see the nut coming down there, the bolt top coming down to the top of the spring compressor. And then I'm going to put one on the other side as well. Over here. Again, I'm just tightening this with my hand, finger tight. There's obviously no way to get a wrench in there, but I'm just going to get these just finger tight. Okay, finger tight on both sides. So the trick to this is, and the reason why you need the jack, even though it's already off the ground, is I'm going to go ahead and put some pressure underneath the control arms and start to compress that shock, right? So as I'm starting to compress the shock, you can see I gained a little ground here. I can tighten these up just a little bit more by hand. And as I continue, I'm just going to continue to put some pressure on that. A couple of pumps. And tighten up a little more. Tighten up a little more. And I'm going to continue to do this until I start to lift the vehicle off of the jack stand, or in my case, off the hoist on this side. And what that's doing, obviously, is I'm compressing this spring with the jack. And as I'm compressing the spring, I'm just keeping that compression that I've gained with the jack by tightening those spring compressors by hand. Okay, looks like that's all I'm going to get. It's coming off the hoist right there. So that's about as much as I'm going to get. It's not going to compress it anymore. So I've effectively taken enough tension off that, or enough compression into that spring, that when I take the whole thing off, that spring is going to remain slightly compressed. It's going to remain compressed enough that I can get that nut off the top. That's the whole reason you're doing this. Because eventually we're going to take these bolts off the shock tower to drop it, but this bolt up here that holds the shock into the shock tower, if you were to take that off without compressing the spring, everything would fly everywhere. That's really dangerous. So that's why you got to compress the springs. But as you can see, I did that with no tools, simply the jack. I didn't have to put any wrench. I didn't have to stress myself out on cranking on this spring. I just jacked it up, took the tension out, and merely tightened it, the spring compressor by hand. But now that it's compressed, it's going to hold that shape as I take it out. So let's go ahead and get started with the rest of that. Okay, so now that I've got that spring compressor on there with the spring compressed with this jack, I'm going to go ahead and let the pressure off. And as you can see, that spring has remained somewhat compressed in that middle section, and that's exactly what we were after. So next thing we're going to do to get this shock out, you have to take off the tie rod. So this is a 21. It's the same as what you used to get the lug nuts off. So your 21 is going to take that off, and then these are 15 up here. So we're going to take this off. We're going to go ahead and take this. This is a 30. I'm going to put my impact with a 30 socket on the back side and just use a crescent wrench, an adjustable spanner on the front side to get that off. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Okay, so the 21 on the tie rod. That's easy to do with an impact. If you don't have an impact, what you're going to run into is that you might find that this spindle turns as you're trying to get this nut off. So this is a hex, and you can put a hex wrench on this. I forget what size it is. It's fairly small, obviously, but you can put a hex on this and then put a regular open spanner on this, on the nut down here, and that way this won't turn as you're trying to turn the nut. So that's the trick to getting those off. Now once you've gotten that off, you can just kind of jiggle this a little bit. If you use two hands, it's certainly easier, and you can usually get that to work its way out. And if it's a little, if it's being a little difficult to get out, you can certainly use a hammer and tap on it. I kind of like to do the trick where you tap on the side and then tap on the top. I'm not obviously not using a sledgehammer here. And take a little tension off it. Yeah, and then with two hands, it just drops right out. So we got that out. Next, we're going to go ahead and take that bolt out of the bottom. Okay, as I mentioned, this is a 30 millimeter nut and bolt. So I'm going to put my impact on the bolt side. Make sure to get that on there nice, and put the crescent on this side. And see if you can't get it. Okay, here we go. I temporarily stick this tie rod back up in there, keep that out of the way. There's a little bit of tension on that, so so that bolt is going to need just a little bit of persuasion to slide the rest of the way out. There's, oh, I don't know, a dozen different ways you can get it out. You can tap on the far side. You can tap on this side to get that out. You could also, actually what I should do is just take the pressure off of that bolt, but it's easy enough to fidget around with it and get it to come on out by turning it. So that's the bottom. It is out now. Yep. Okay, next thing we're going to do is go ahead and take these nuts off the top. There's 3 of them, and these are not symmetrical. So just to help and make sure that you get the top hat back in the right place, I'm going to go ahead and put a mark just on this side. That way I know, that needs to face me as I take it out. Well, actually, as I put it back in. It's the only way it'll come out, but as I put it back in, I'll know to put that mark facing me. That way I know I have it oriented in the right way as I go back in with it. Now these 15s, there's 3 of them to take off, and you can get them from the bottom, certainly with a ratcheting wrench. Makes it pretty easy. You can actually get them from the top as well. If you go in there with a socket and some extensions to get through there. Want to get them all, each one broken loose. And the third one is a little trickier to get to. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. I know I can't see it. but I'm just feeling with my finger. Get the wrench on top of it. Yeah, and then I can loosen it for back there. So I'm going to go ahead and use 2 hands to get these all loose. And you want to take this front one off last because this thing is heavy, and you know, you want to have one hand on it as you take this last one off, so that it doesn't just come dropping out of there. It is supported on the bottom down here right now, so I'm not really worried about it falling out, but not a bad idea to leave this front one, have that be the last one you take off. Okay, so I've got all the nuts off up top there, and now I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. One of the things that you got to do is you got to finagle the hub around just a little bit to give yourself some clearance back here, especially with the spring compressor on it. You need a little extra clearance there. So I just use my knee on that to kind of finagle it around a little bit, and grab this, and it'll just drop right out. And there you go. That part is finished. Okay, so now we're ready to take the top hat off of the shock. It's this nut here. On these, it's a 15. And again, just like when we're taking the tie rod off, this rod will spin. With the impact, sometimes it doesn't. It's a nylock nut. So sometimes it won't spin if you use the impact, but this is squared off on this particular shock. Sometimes it's hex, but you can put a wrench on the end of this and then an open end wrench on that if that starts spinning. But in my case, I'm kind of hoping that's not going to happen. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to put this impact on there and just spin it right off. Yep, there we go, just like that. And the reason that we have that spring compressor on is because if we didn't, this would have so much pressure against this bottom shock or spring mount, the spring perch, that this would just fly off. It would strip the end of the shock, which isn't a big deal because you're going to replace it. But that's very dangerous. That's why the spring compressor is on here. And as you saw earlier, it was pretty easy to get on there. That's the reason you have it. So I'm putting these Bilstein shocks on the car. It's not real. Their instructions are not terribly clear on how to put these together. They come with a bag full of parts, and you don't need all of them. But the first thing that you have to do is you put this rubber collar on. They send you the collar, rubber collar, and steel collar. So you put those on, and then this is for the shock perch. The spring perch, and it has to go on here. They've got a ring, a snap ring around the shock, and this just slides down on top of that, so that when you then install the spring perch actually will sit on top of that, and that's how you get that to sit. So it's not real clear how you put those pieces on there because they don't really have instructions at all, but that's what you do. Put those 2 pieces on the shaft, slide that down on, and then the spring perch will sit on top of that piece. Then we're ready to put the assembly back into the spring assembly. You insert the shock obviously up in through here, and once you get close to the top, you can kind of look down in this hole right here, and you're not going to be able to see it on camera, but as you look down in there, you can see the top of the the shock shaft coming up through there, and you can just make sure that you guide it into that hole. Okay, here's the other reason why we've got those spring compressors on there, is that with those on, after I threaded that the shaft of the shock up through the top of the tower, it gives me just enough so that I've got a few threads that I can go ahead and start the nut on. Without having that spring compressed, there's no way that you would get that on there and get it started. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my impact gun to tighten this down. I'm going to hold the back side of this shock because that shock will spin if I don't hold it. I want to make sure we're going in the tightening direction because we wouldn't want to loosen it off there. And that's all there is to that. That assembly is ready to go back into the car. So now that the assembly is ready to go back up into the car, I could actually take these off because the whole thing's bolted together and it can slide up in there with these off. But to do that, I'd have to take a wrench and slowly take some off this side, some off that side, release the tension little by little on each side, and I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to slide the whole thing up in there. It is a little clumsier with these still on it, but if I slide it up in there, then I can use the jack to put the pressure underneath the bottom. That's going to take the tension off of these, and they'll just be finger tight. I don't have to use a wrench to get those off because that's a pain in the neck. And remember that mark that I put on this side. That reminds me, this faces me as this goes up in because the three studs that are on top of here, these three studs, those are not symmetrical. So you got to put this up in the right direction. And quite frankly, this is the hardest part of the whole job. That thing is heavy. And shoving it up in here, trying to get it to go up into that is a pain in the neck. I'm going to put the camera down, I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to let you watch me. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start working on putting this thing up in here. I'm going to try not to curse at it. But it can be a royal pain. There's just enough room to get it up in here. Move that out with my knee a little bit. I can't see any of those studs really, so I'm just trying to feel a little bit, feel maybe where it's supposed to go. Such a nice feeling when it finally does go into place, but it takes a little bit of work. Oh, this is fun. I love this. Love this kind of work. Okay, break time. Okay, so as soon as I turned the camera off, it stabbed right up in there. I should have turned the camera off sooner. Sorry you guys didn't get to see it, but I'm happy it's up in there. That's good news for me. Again, it's good to have that mark on there, because if I hadn't had that mark on there and the way I was struggling to get that in there, I would have thought, man, I must have this thing oriented wrong. But with that mark on there, I was confident that I had it in the right direction. So it was all full speed ahead to get that thing up in there. Now I just got to get these nuts on here. And that back one started. And I will tighten these up before I attempt to go ahead and slide this bolt through here. So I'm going to tighten these first. And that's what that at 15. So I got my 15 ratcheting wrench. I'll put it on here and start to tighten these up. Bringing that all the way up in there. Feel that start to get tight, go to the next one. That one in the back is the most fun, of course, to get to. And again, with the camera, you might get to see it before I do. I'm just feeling my way back there. Make sure I get it finger tight before I go to put the wrench on it. And these front two, I just tighten those, up snug. I didn't tighten them all the way. This back one is the first one. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it all the way down. You can hear the sound change as it gets tight. Okay, that one's good. That one's good. And that one's good. Now Now we can go ahead and work on getting the bolt through the shock on the bottom there. One of the other things about having that spring compressor on there is it holds that shock up a little bit. Otherwise, the shock extends and you have to use some screwdrivers or whatever under here to kind of force it into place. But with the spring compressor on there, it's holding it up just a little bit. I'm going to have to fiddle with that. It's going to take 2 hands, so I'm going to set the camera down. Yep, so let's go ahead and see if we can't finagle this in there. A screwdriver up under here to try and finagle this into place. There we go. Okay. This point, I'll go ahead and put this back in. Get a nut on there. Get this started, again using the 30 and the crescent. Okay, so I just pulled that down snug, and the reason I did that was that I want to take the pressure. I want to put pressure up under the spring, underneath this shock system. The reason is because there's rubber bushings in the bottom of the shock mount, and if you tighten them while it's in full sag, then that rubber bushing is going to be in a bind, and it'll add some spring tension to that shock. You don't really want that. These are supposed to be tightened when they're on normal pressure, like when it's on the ground. But what I'm going to do is put the jack back underneath here and then tighten that. Then put the tie rod in, and then at that point I'll be able to take the spring compressors off, because again I've got that tension that has it lifted up and is compressing that spring enough that these will just come right off. Okay, now that I've got that compressed up in there, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this this bottom bolt with my impact. All right, that's good and tight. And with the compressed now, yeah, I could take these off. They're just finger tight. So I never really had to put a wrench on these. That's the part of using a spring compressor that's a pain, is you got to slowly work them. Now what I want to do is I'm cranking a bunch of slack up in there. Let me change the camera. So I'm twisting these and getting enough slack in here so that as I release the tension off the bottom, right, you know, I'm gonna let the jack down, and that's gonna release the tension on this shock, and expand that spring, and I still want to be able to have enough slack to be able to get these spring compressors out. I can't really pull them out with the spring compressed because there's just not enough room in here to get that lip out and over. So I'm gonna have to do that by letting a little bit of tension off the jack. Okay. Sometimes you need to tap these to get the pressure off them. And off it comes, just like that. Okay. All right, the last piece is putting the tie rod back in, putting the wheel on, and then happy days. Let's use two hands to get that job done. Okay, now remember this is a 21. I'm again going to try and do this with the impact. Yep, tightened right up. But again, if it doesn't, you know, if you can't tighten it, if this shaft starts to spin, you can always put a wrench on this top part and then wrench that with an open end wrench on the bottom. Yeah, that side's done. New shock. And hopefully that gives you guys an idea that you don't have to buy the full assembly. These springs, there's nothing wrong with that, right? You got a much bigger selection of shocks. You can get nicer shocks if you're willing to go to the extra effort. And people will tell you, oh, spring compressor, they're so dangerous, they're so horrible. Well, they can be dangerous, but you know, if you do it like this, I never put a wrench on it. As you saw, tightened it by hand, loosened it by hand. You know, sometimes if they get stuck, you might have to, you know, grab the shaft with a pair of pliers or maybe stick a wrench up in there somehow. But you know, it's not that hard a job. So hopefully that gave you guys some pointers, some ideas, and you can tackle the job yourself. All right, see you.